Hello. The book I chose this week is called The Death of the Hat, A Brief History of Poetry in 50 Objects. It's by Paul B. Janicso, illustrated by Chris Roshka, published by Candlewick Press. It was copyrighted in 2015. It is poetry. There are 75 pages, and it's for ages 5th grade and up. So this book starts off with an introduction which explains kind of how the book was compiled together, like how all these poems came about. And then it's divided into different sections. So it starts off with the early Middle Ages, and then you have the High Middle Ages, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment period, the Romantic period, the Victorian period, and you have the Modern period, and then the Postmodern period, which is what we're in right now, and then you have Contemporary. So there are many different poems in each section, and each poem talks about a different object. So it goes through, and like here in the Renaissance section, we have a poem called From Mercutio's Queen Mab Speech, and it's by William Shakespeare. So it has a nice little poem, and then there's a picture that kind of goes along with the poem, so you can really understand what the poem is about. It goes on to talk about all sorts of different things. And these pictures are all in watercolor, so I think they're very pretty. They have lots of different colors. So I think this book is a great book for kids. It really gives them an understanding of like different things like different objects in the different time periods. Instead of having to like read a whole story or a whole passage about it, they get to read a poem about it, so they can really feel how that object impacted that time period and what it was used for and things like that. So it makes the readers think a little bit more about that object, and they can just picture the object a little bit better. So an activity that I would have the students do is to pick an everyday object that they encounter daily. It can be their Pop-Tart at breakfast, or the blanket that they sleep with, or whatever it may be. So I would have them write a poem about that object and how it impacts their life every day. Like what the object does, where is the object located, what does it look like. Those are just a few examples of questions that the students would answer within their poem. Then I would have them share their poem with another student, and that student would then have to make an illustration based on the description from the poem of the object. So I think it would be really fun to see what the students come up with and how close their illustration is to what the actual object looks like and what the object looks like in the writer's head. So I think this would be a fun writing activity as well as an art activity for the students to really feel and visualize what the writer is writing about, which I think is kind of the point of poetry. So I think it would be fun and exciting and a good way for kids to use different adjectives, verbs, pronouns, all sorts of, they're describing words, and really a new take on describing words instead of just your typical describing words, and working on using synonyms and things like that in describing, and color and textures and all sorts of things. So I think that would be a really fun activity.